What's up, everybody? My name is Tucker. In today's video, we're going to be talking about some more Ben Simmons trade news. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials up there. Let's go ahead and get started. So we got a Woj tweet this morning, and it began with ESPN sources. Philadelphia 76ers All-Star Ben Simmons, and I thought it was a trade tweet for a moment. It's not. Will not report for opening a training camp next week and intends to never play another game for the franchise. Simmons hasn't spoken to the team since a late August meeting when he communicated this message to Sixers officials. So this has been a thing since last month, where he met with Philly and he was like, you know what? I'm not showing up to training camp. I'm not playing for y'all ever again. Figure it out. And this comes on the heels of a report yesterday where the Sixers were still actively attempting to convince Ben Simmons to return to the team, presumably because they have not gotten trade offers that they feel good about in exchange for Simmons, and or they just don't want to deal him in general. Now, this is significant because there's another Woj tweet that also mentions that Simmons is obviously aware that the team can fine him, they can suspend him, they can take away the entirety of his salary for this season if he does not show up, because after all, it is an NBA contract. And the very nature of a contract is that the Sixers agree to pay Ben Simmons for his services in this case being playing for their basketball team. And if he does not show up, he does not get paid. He seems willing to deal with that, and I think that that's the right stance for him to take. If he truly doesn't want to be in Philly anymore, he's going to get moved at some point. It might take a couple of months. It might be the trade deadline, but it's not like this is a Sixers team that's going to win 20 games this year. They want to compete. They want to win a title. They've got an MVP caliber player on their team in Joel Embiid. They can't afford to have someone the caliber of Ben Simmons, even, with whatever issues you have with Simmons, they can't afford for him to just sit at home for half the season or potentially the entire season and go into the playoffs. This is going to get resolved at some point. Simmons is going to get moved. How long it takes, I'm not sure, but it's a really, really interesting scenario. I've got some fake trades for you at the end of the video, but first I kind of want to talk about the context of this, because this could be potentially a precedent-setting moment. Ben Simmons is a former number one overall pick. He's like 24, 25 years old. He's got multiple years left on his contract until, I believe, 2025, a relatively recently signed rookie max extension. And if he can push his way out of a situation in Philadelphia in which the team is successful and he is the one that struggled in the postseason and ultimately, was one of the bigger reasons why they did not advance further in the playoffs, if all of those things combine to mean that he can still force his way out, there's no bar anymore. There's no standard anymore for players staying in a situation when they're under contract. Because up until this point, there have been situations where guys have pushed their way out on an expiring contract and tried to get traded away. Or Harden, who had 2 years left on his contract. Or Anthony Davis, who kind of planned some stuff out in advance of being an expiring contract. Ben Simmons is not even remotely close to having the leverage required to make this happen, apart from what he's planning on doing, which is just straight up not showing up to the team. So if he can get moved, all bets are off. Every single the player empowerment era will have reached its absolute peak if Ben Simmons can fight his way out of Philadelphia. And again, given the situation the Sixers are in this season and trying to be a successful team, I can't see any way that he doesn't eventually get moved. I think the situation would be different if this was Minnesota and Karl Anthony Towns, and they're winning 20 games every year, and if Cat doesn't show up, they'll win 15 instead of 20, and they'll just convince him to stay or get really good trade value out of him down the road. It's different for Philly. They're on the clock here. They know they need to be good this year. They can't afford to let this guy just sit at home. Interestingly, there have been no rumors that I have seen, at least legitimately sourced rumors about Ben Simmons trade packages, which tells me one of two things. Either there aren't any good ones out there, or Philly has shut down all of their potential Ben Simmons trade operations in an effort to convince him to come back to the team and to show up to training camp and play for the team this year. But again, if he has just decided not to show up, the longer Philly waits, the worse position they're in for this upcoming season, and that's what Simmons and his representation are counting on. Best case scenario for him, he continues to put pressure on the team, and before he loses any kind of significant amount of money, the Sixers end up moving on from him. He goes to a new situation because they just quite simply don't have a choice. Worst case scenario for him and for the team is that he sits out the entire season as a 24-year-old, and the Sixers aren't as good as they would have been if he was on the team, and he loses a ton of money. In my opinion, I can't imagine that this gets past the trade deadline of this upcoming season. I would be shocked if that's the case. Quite frankly, I would be surprised if we begin the season and get more than a week or two in the year without a Ben Simmons trade. Keep in mind, last year, James Harden played for the Rockets for the first handful of games of the year before being traded to Brooklyn. But again, if Simmons isn't even playing, then there's no reason to even try and think that, convince him to stay if he's already committed to not showing up to training camp or to play for the team at all. You can try and call his bluff if you want to, Philly. I don't think it's a bluff. I legitimately don't think he ever wants to play for the team again, and Clutch is going to try and, strong arm this as much as they can, which brings us to some trade possibilities. Again, we're only like a handful of weeks away from the start of the NBA season. I know we're like peak football season, and I'm loving football right now, but we're really not that far away from the beginning of the NBA season. And this is where we're at right now. This first trade I'm bringing up, this is where we're at right now in the Ben Simmons trade stuff. John Wall, I think the John Wall stuff is becoming more and more realistic the longer and longer this extends, this whole situation, which is interesting because one of the reasons that Simmons is so upset with Philly is not only that they're exploring trade options for him this offseason, but he basically was packing his bags to go to Houston in the James Harden trade 7 months ago. He lost trust in the franchise. He played poorly in the postseason, and now Houston has an opportunity to screw up that situation and then benefit from it if something like this were to happen. This trade here on screen, it's Green and Simmons to Houston in exchange for Wall, and I put these picks on the screen. Use whatever variety of first-round picks you want to. Houston has plenty at their disposal, and like if I'm Houston and Philly tells me, you know what? We're willing to take John Wall back as the only player compensation in return for Ben Simmons, but we want draft compensation as well. I would be willing to throw in a lot of first-round picks, more than the 4 listed on screen here, to acquire Ben Simmons in exchange for John Wall for a variety of different reasons. One, it would be an awesome fit alongside some of the younger players that you have there. He fits long-term. He's signed long-term. It's an awesome fit in Houston. Still a very talented player and a young player. Again, a guy that signed a rookie max contract extension for a reason. Ben Simmons is a good basketball player, and I get to dump the Wall contract and don't give up any of my young players. I don't know how realistic that scenario is. I don't like the Wall fit at all in Philadelphia, but we could get to the point where this is just where we're at now. Things have stretched. This situation has gone on for so long that eventually Philly might have to settle, and it might look like something like this, where they get Wall and a ton of picks, and then they use the picks down the road to go and get some other players in this roster. This first trade shows you just how much of a disaster this is turning out to be for Philadelphia. We move on now to the second trade here that I have offered. The third one is very, very interesting. I want to throw the second one in here again in that they might have to settle category, where it's you can do whatever you want to with the picks. I'm not going to sit here and arbitrate, oh, it's 1 pick, it's 2 picks, it's 3 picks, whatever you want to do. But essentially, I think the Simmons-McCollum thing is still on the table. I've talked before about how I really like the Simmons fit in Portland. They're not getting Dame. So unless they think that it's going to upset Dame to move CJ McCollum, Portland, I'm sure, would look at possibly moving him, shake things up on this roster. And, Philly at this point would probably be pretty happy to get someone like CJ McCollum. Fits better on that roster, certainly, than John Wall does, that you can figure out the draft compensation. But here's the last one. I put this one out on Twitter half jokingly, and people actually really like it. And I say half jokingly because, again, I think it just illustrates kind of where we're at with the Simmons stuff. It's Simmons to Detroit, which is exciting, right? I mean, him and Cade Cunningham. In this case, Killian Hayes is still there. In exchange for Kelly Olynyk, Jeremy Grant, and 2 top 5 protected future first-round picks from Detroit. This would be easier if Detroit had other teams' picks to throw in here, because then they could do like one of their own picks, top 5 protected, and then like 3 other teams' picks, and I think it would make it easier. The fact that they have to use their own makes them a little bit more nervous probably about making this deal actually happen. But let's just imagine this for a moment. If you're Detroit, you've got Cade Cunningham, you've got Ben Simmons, 2 6'8", 6'9" guys that can handle, can create. I was about to say can shoot. Obviously, that's not the case with Ben Simmons. It's a really cool duo. It's a really cool combination that you can build around. That's a foundation of 2 players that you can continue to build something with there in Detroit. I like that a lot. When you're looking at potential situations that Ben Simmons could go to, get out of the spotlight a little bit, I think that's super fun. For Philly, not an ideal Simmons package. However, Grant's an awesome defender. He's an improved offensive player. The fit between him, Tobias Harris, and Embiid in the front court is certainly weird, but not any weirder than what Ben Simmons already was. And from a scoring standpoint, you could certainly make the case that Jeremy Grant is a better scorer than Ben Simmons. And then you get the floor spacing of Kelly Olynyk, someone that I made fun of last year at times with Rockets fans just kind of poking fun at it. But he certainly can score for you, can space the floor. Again, another front court player doesn't help them with their backcourt situation like the other two trades do, but at least it's interesting. And then you get potentially valuable future draft compensation from Detroit. You can use these picks to get a backcourt player. Maybe you send one of these to Toronto for Goran Dragic, whatever the case may be. You use these picks down the road for other compensation. It's not perfect, but none of these are. That's where we're at. That's the bottom line of the Simmons situation right now is nothing is going to be perfect. Nothing is going to be ideal for them, but they have to make the move. And unless they're okay with not having Ben Simmons play basketball for them this season, they have maneuvered themselves into a situation in which these are trades they have to seriously look at. These would have been an absolute joke when the season ended for Philadelphia and a Ben Simmons trade became more and more of a possibility, or at any point over the last 2 seasons that people have been saying, hey, these guys don't work. The Embiid-Simmons thing doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. At any point over the last 2 years, if they had looked to trade Simmons, these trade offers would have been an absolute joke. They're not a joke anymore. These are realistic, potentially settling trades, but this is just where we're at. It's been a complete disaster from start to finish, and I can't imagine that Simmons is bluffing. I can't imagine that they're going to continue to position themselves the way that they have publicly, and then Simmons just waves the white flag and says, you know what, I'll show up anyway. I think it's an unprecedented use of player power within the NBA, given his age, given the contract that he is under in Philadelphia, and I think it's going to work, and it's going to be something we're going to look back on as a pretty precedent-setting moment within the NBA. At whatever point he does get moved, that could be tomorrow, could be next week, it could be 6 months from now. I have no idea, but I'm very interested to find out. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like rating on it. Check out my other videos on screen. Check out my socials at the top of the screen as well. Once again, my name is Tucker. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of your Tuesday, and I will see you all next time.